I'd like to welcome everyone to our webinar today and thank you for your attendance. Today's webinar is entitled 6 Steps to Socialize Enterprise Architect Models. Sparx Systems Prolaborate empowers relevant stakeholders, including C-level executives, analysts, and other business users with curated views of the model. Learn how to set up and configure various options with Sparx Systems Prolaborate. My name's Scott Hebert from Sparx Systems, and today I'm joined by our Prolaborate evangelist, Nizam Mohammed. We plan on presenting for approximately 40 to 45 minutes, and the last 10 minutes at the end of the session will be left to answer any questions that you may have.
Welcome everyone, this is Nizam. Thanks Scott for the heads up. We'll be looking at how Prolaborate could be used as the social collaboration portal for enterprise architect. This webinar is a follow-up from the previous session, which gave a heads up of the overarching capabilities of Prolaborate. So to start with, let's look at the 6 steps that we'll be walking through in this webinar. So we'll be starting with how to define sections. The sections is where Prolaborate lets users pick and choose the parts of the model that they would like to expose to their end users. Then we'll go and look at how to define custom dashboards that lets us curate the diagrams and the lists and reports that your end users will be interested to look at, followed by how to simplify your end user experience with simpler user forms rather than showing them a whole raft of tag values and attributes that we usually see in a comprehensive modeling tool. Prolaborate will let us define simpler forms on top of existing artifacts to give a better user experience. So these 3 steps are the core setup steps, followed by how to enable collaboration, how to conduct model reviews that would engage the stakeholders in a gated review, and also to see how Prolaborate would help us bridge between various enterprise tools such as Jira and Confluence and SharePoint. So to start with, as I said, the first step is how do we share selected parts of your EA model to the intended end users? One of the key challenges that we have seen in the past is the comprehensiveness or the rich contents in EA models are quite good for someone who knows how to skim through and how to find their way out. But for a new user, it has always been a little daunting or overwhelming to go through the entire model to find the right information. Prolaborate allows us to pick and choose the parts of the model that would be interesting for a particular user group or a user. So to start working with defining a sections, once you add a Prolaborate repository, which is basically using the Pro Cloud Server to connect to an underlying database, Prolaborate gives us 2 options. Whether you would like to configure your sections manually, or would you like Prolaborate to do it automatically so that it adds all the packages as sections and configures permissions to the default user. So let's choose the automatic option to start with to understand how an entire repository from an EA model is being added as sections into Prolaborate. As you could see, all packages and sub-packages have been added in this case, and this will be used as the baseline to configure permissions. So access permissions is another important aspect of the initial configuration, where Prolaborate gives you very low-level granularity to control which diagram or element or package a user or a user group could see. So if someone has permissions to read or write or collaborate, they see this in their viewport. Otherwise, it will be completely hidden from them. Following that, I'm going to add the same repository, but this time choose a manual configuration. So the previous time it shows all packages and assigned it to the default user. This time I'm just going to say, let me do it manually, and this will just show me the repository browser from the underlying EA model, the project browser. And now I could drag and drop packages or sub packages. I could choose an individual sub package or drop an entire package and all its sub packages, and that forms my sections in my portal that I'm defining for my end users. And once I'm done with that, I could assign the user groups or users who gets to see this. So if I don't give permission to one of these packages to a user or a user group, he would not even see that in their view portal. So that kind of eliminates the complexity. It greatly simplifies the end user's view, so he could just focus on the things that are relevant to them. There's also a third option in initial configuration, and that is having a complete blanket permissions for the entire repository. So let me choose the manual configuration option once again, go ahead and define sections. But in defining the access permissions, instead of going at a package level, I'm going to do it at the entire repository level. So all packages that are included in this portal will be given read and collaborate access to everyone who have access to it. This is kind of seen as a replacement to a HTML publish. So now looking at how an end user's view is based on the sections that we have defined, as you could see, the repository browser only shows the packages and sub packages that he or she has permission. And the My Diagrams portal is a quick and easy way to look at the diagrams in a thumbnail view. And these diagrams also shows only those diagrams that I've been given permission explicitly through the initial configuration. So if you have a management group or a reviewing board who only have to see a couple of diagrams, you could control that using the access permissions and let them see only 6 to 8 diagrams in their view portal. So with that, we saw how to define sections, and the next step will be how to define dashboards, which is a way to curate the information that we have initially defined as part of our repository, and to create reports or lists or diagram thumbnails based on that. So I'll pass it on to Scott to walk us through how to do these dashboards and enhance the user experience.
Let's begin by opening our demonstration architecture model to understand how to design and build dashboards. Prolaborate provides a number of dashboards with graphs, reports, element lists, diagram thumbnails, and much more. This visual information provides insights into our model, helping to bring the data to life and keep all stakeholders better informed. Switching to the business analysis dashboard, you can see that the model data has been read and analysed to produce the charts and reports shown on screen, covering active reviews, user stories by various categories, requirement lists, and much more. Many of these reports also have a search box to quickly find what you need. The My Diagram view shows the list of diagrams that each user has access to. Each diagram has a convenient title, thumbnail, and access to quick information. You can use this screen to quickly navigate to a given diagram. Navigate to the Manage Dashboard screen to preview and edit dashboards that you have created. Users can design dashboards to suit their individual needs. Let's take a look at an example to see how they are constructed. Simply press the Edit button. The example on screen has a number of widgets that are used to display element lists, reports on EA models, charts, queries, sprints, and other relevant model information. The layout of the widgets determines the layout of the dashboard that the end user views in Prolaborate. To build a dashboard from scratch, the first thing we need to do is add an appropriate widget to display a diagram thumbnail. Simply select the desired diagram from the model and resize the widget in the browser to the desired height and width. Press the blue plus sign to add additional widgets. It is also possible to add hyperlinks to model elements and diagrams. You can even configure a custom report, adding a report of EA elements based on filters, selecting package, selecting element type, or simply adding a report based on a SQL query. The first example displays a number of requirements from selected packages. The second report is a little more detailed and uses a custom SQL query to show applications by lifecycle. You'll note that after I create each widget, I provide a meaningful title, ensuring that it can be easily identified. Prolaborate can also create custom charts. For example, adding a graph to report a list of components based on a tagged value. You can select from pie charts, donuts, bar charts, bubble and heat maps. Each chart has a variety of simple configuration options. You can also reposition and resize each widget so that the layout and report sequence appears in the correct order and meets your expectations. Managing access. Press the blue key on the bottom right of the page to manage access to model components. It is relatively easy to manage access to various aspects of the underlying model. You can assign users, user groups to each of the dashboards and diagrams. Looking at the finished product, you can examine each diagram thumbnail and drill down to an element list, viewing the properties of various model elements. Examine each graph in more detail, looking at each section of the graph and chart. This is ideal for presentations where you are examining data in greater detail. Click on the graph to navigate to specific elements.
Thanks, Scott, for giving a great overview on how to build dashboards in Prolaborate that could really change the user experience by curating the diagrams and hyperlinks and reports and charts based on your data. So the next thing that we'll be looking at is how to define a custom form or a simplified user form so that your users would be able to focus on the right level of details that would be necessary for their due diligence or to make some key decisions. So Prolaborate's ability to read EA's metadata and the MDG technologies and let the model authors to define custom forms by just dragging and dropping greatly helps us to redefine the user experience, because one of the key points from EA model is the ability to drive decisions and due diligence by the non-modeling community. So now let's start looking at Prolaborate dashboard that Scott said. But before that, let me look at Enterprise Architect and navigate through to one of the business process diagrams and open up the properties of a BPMN activity. As we all know, there is a whole raft of tagged values that are prescribed for this BPMN activity by the BPMN 2.0 standard, and EA fully complies to the standard and shows all the tag values, which is really good for a modeler or a process engineer to capture all these details and go to the trenches. However, this level of detail could be overwhelming for a business user who'd just like to look at a quick synopsis. Prolaborate shows all these properties by default. However, it lets the model author who builds these views to custom design forms to target to specific user groups. So let me start by defining a profile for the BPMN 2.0 technology focused on process reviewers, for example. So what Prolaborate will allow us to do is I could disable the whole technology related attributes to start with so that it's not shown to anyone. And then I could go and define a specific stereotype. Here, as you could see for BPMN 2.0 activity, the whole group is hidden. So I could start by defining a new group in the form, pick and choose tagged values from the list of BPMN tagged values that is shown in Prolaborate. I could specify tooltips that will be shown to your business user when he or she hovers over that particular property. This is again to further simplify the user experience. Prolaborate will also allow us to enable or disable a property for edit. Even if a user has write access, you could control whether he could edit a particular property by specifying permissions at a very granular level. And what we are also doing now is to drag and drop some custom tag values that we could define using Prolaborate as well. So once I've defined that form for BPMN 2.0 activity, I'm going back to the actual process diagram that we looked at to see how this is reflected in an end user's view. So let me open the BPMN 2.0 process diagram and then click on one of the BPMN 2.0 activity. And as you could see here, you only see the activity type, the task type, the cost, and the list of applications that are related to it as a tag value. And as you could see, instead of showing them the whole raft of tag values, this gives them a lot of focus. What Prolaborate also allows you to do is to minimize the noise in your repository browser. So by default, all the events and gateways and all the anonymous objects are shown in your repository browser. However, Prolaborate's form designer will also allow you to say which of these stereotypes would you be expected to see in the project browser. So I've just got the BPMN activity, the process, the lanes, and the participant or the pools to be enabled, in which case I'm hiding all the other intermediary objects so that my end user, when he decides to navigate through the project browser, only sees those objects that I've purposely enabled. So it minimizes a lot of noise from the end user's view. So with that said, we have done the basic configurations for Prolaborate. And the next key aspect of a web portal like this is to engage the right people at the right capacity to collaborate. And I would request Scott to walk us through how to enable collaboration to foster further engagement and harvest feedback.
On screen we have our Sparx Systems Prolaborate dashboard. I'll begin by configuring the mailer by adding SMTP details to help facilitate notifications and collaboration within my team. Select Mailer Configuration from the main menu. Enter your SMTP settings as desired and then enable SMTP. At the bottom of the page you'll see a number of distinct settings. Guest Sign Up allows users to automatically sign up and become a guest user. You can disable this for security reasons if the model data is restricted. Invite Collaborators option lets other stakeholders be invited via email. The third EA Notifications option will send out email notifications about changes in your Enterprise Architect models. Notification settings. Now let's take a look at the various notification settings that are available. Sparx Systems Prolaborate allows you to configure notification frequency and also provides the ability to opt in or opt out for various notifications. For example, you can be notified when a discussion is created or when a user replies to your existing discussion. Manage subscriptions. Users can subscribe or unsubscribe to packages, elements, and diagrams. This allows them to either receive or stop receiving notifications. This allows stakeholders to only see parts of the model that are relevant to their job role and only get notified about changes that are relevant to the elements and diagrams that they are working on. Comments. It is also possible to use Sparx Systems Prolaborate to comment on model elements. Add a new comment by selecting an element. Once you create a comment, you can see how easy it is to tag other model collaborators, tag references to other Enterprise Architect elements, and set the priority of the discussion. Once you send the message, all other users are notified via in-app notifications, email notifications in Outlook or a similar email tool, and reminders. Clicking on Notifications takes the stakeholder to the discussion and opens the respective diagram. This makes it much easier to find relevant items and always have discussions in context. It helps provide greater focus. Users can then reply or like the discussion. The Feeds window allows users to view the entire discussion across the team, like a social media wall showing all the relevant news feeds. Filters. Filters can be applied to see my discussions and any recent discussions. You can drill down to relevant discussion in a few mouse clicks, providing better focus. This allows the end user to have greater control over what they see and work on at any given time. These filtered discussions can be shared as a link by selecting Share this feed. Alternatively, they can be printed to PDF and shared with other users in a conventional printed manner.
Thanks, Scott, for giving us a great head start on how the collaboration could be enabled in Prolaborate and how that could be used to engage the wider stakeholders. So moving to the next step, we'll be looking at reviews. So reviews, which we have been conventionally using the Word documents, printing them from the EA models, sharing it via emails, and getting the feedback as email replies or in an Excel spreadsheet, will be redefined with the more real-time reviews based on live EA contents, complemented by the collaboration framework that we just saw. So Prolaborate's review kind of redefines the way we have looked at model reviews and improving models continuously to align with the stakeholder engagements or stakeholder expectations. So let me start by adding a new review. So as I specify some basic details and specify a start date and end date, you would also notice that Prolaborate gives us a couple more options to slightly customize the workflow. For example, you could have a separate approval workflow where in certain organizations they have a process to gather all the review comments, fix the models, and then send it out to the senior stakeholders for reviews or approvals. You could also control some options to allow the reviewers to share or invite further users. So once the initial configuration is done, we could choose the diagrams or packages or elements from the model that you would like to be included in this review. And then configure users. So all the available users will be shown as a list, or you could even invite collaborators just by typing their email. So once a review is created, it will then notify every reviewer who has been tagged in this review with an email and in-app notifications. As I log in as another user, you would also see that there are reminders coming up at the first go to inform the user that there is an active review which requires his input. So as I click in that reminder window, it takes me to a reviewer's dashboard from which he could quickly navigate to the list of items that are awaiting his review comments or approval. So he could quickly say, I'm okay with this diagram or a requirement, or he could further add his feedback by just clicking on the comment and adding a new comment. You could also do bulk operations. For example, you could approve, or you could mark all items as reviewed, or you could just share this review dashboard to your peers or your managers to let them view the current status of the review. Instead of typing in an email with the current status, you could just let them view this dashboard anonymously. You could see that there is no user login required here, but they will be able to track how the review is progressing. So coming back to the dashboards that we saw when a user logged in, you would have noticed that it's very similar to the dashboards that we saw previously, but these are specifically tailored for reviews. It could be a dashboard for approver, a dashboard for the moderator, a dashboard for the reviewer, so on. And as I get into customizing these dashboards, you would notice the look and feel and all the controls are very similar. However, you would see some additional widgets that are specific to reviews, like the status of contributors or the activity, the comments in the form of graph or charts or reports, whatever makes it easier for us to articulate the review status to the external stakeholders or even to the moderators. With Prolaborate, the moment a user opens up a diagram, it could be from the review dashboard or could be from the diagram thumbnail or could be from the project browser, invariably there'll be a notification which says there's a review active, and if the reviewer has to participate, he just does it by normally commenting on it like he does in a normal collaboration. However, these review comments are automatically tagged against active reviews, in which it will be consolidated in the moderator's view, and it will also be notified to the other reviewers as well. So as I come to the moderator's dashboard, you could see that there are more controls which shows how everyone whom he invited are progressing. So coming back to the reviewer's dashboard, you would also notice there could be an instance where he would like to invite another peer of him or another person in his team to review the similar or same diagrams, and he could just do that by typing in the email of the new user, and the new user gets added as a reviewer for this particular review, pretty much like how someone was set at the very beginning of this review. And as I look at the moderator's dashboard, you'll see that the new user is now shown as one of the contributors, and his updates will also be seen and tracked by everyone else in the review. So that gave us a quick heads up and the steps to set up a review and how we could track reviews based on live EA model diagrams. So with that, we come to the last step in this webinar, which is to integrate the model contents done in Enterprise Architect with the external enterprise tools such as Jira and Confluence. So one of the key challenges in our current practice is to be able to have a consolidated view across various tools. And we'll be seeing how to configure a Jira link or how to share EA diagrams live in Confluence that will make this information sharing seamless. So in terms of linking EA artifacts to Jira, for example, a use case to a user story, there are two ways we could go about it. One is to import the data from Jira into Enterprise Architect and create a link, which could be done through the Pro Cloud Server integration. However, there's also another way where we could have a virtual link between an EA use case and a Jira user story, for example. And we'll be seeing how to create that virtual link. In this approach, the data won't be imported from Jira to EA. However, they would be residing in their own repository, but a virtual link will be created between these two, which will be shown in the diagrams and in the reports, etc. So to do this virtual link, there are a couple of steps. The first one being configuring the connection, which is to specify the server and give the user credentials to connect to the Jira server. Once that's done, we need to define something called an integration attribute, which is very similar to how you define a refgood or a refgood list in EA, but we use Jira selection, Jira filtering to define that attribute. And once that's done, we'll be able to do it like we do for a normal property in Prolaborate. You could go to the modeling languages designer and use this new property and assign it against any EA artifact, for example, a use case. And once these are done, that kind of sets up the platform, and the end user's role is to only click and choose the Jira item like he does a refgood tag value within EA. And while he does that, what Prolaborate does is it creates a two-way link between the EA item and Jira. For example, a use case in EA to a Jira user story, there will be a two-way virtual link created. That will be shown in diagrams as visual cue, using which the users could just click and look at the details. Or you could also navigate to Jira by clicking on a link from Prolaborate. So let's look at that in action now. So let me start by defining a new integration connection. So as we specified previously, to define an integration connection, you need to specify the actual server to which we are connecting to with the system admin and password. Then Prolaborate will allow you to choose the project to which you want to connect, and it will also allow you to choose broadly what kind of filters you want to see within Prolaborate. As a second step, we need to go and define an attribute which we call the integration attribute that's quite similar to a refgood or a refgood list tag value within EA. So I'm choosing the integration application, giving it a name and specifying the type of attributes that could be selected for this attribute or for this tag value. Once we have a property available, I'm just going to the form designer for the UML use case and saying that I would like to see this new integration attribute I just defined to be available for all use cases. So I'm now trying to look at a use case in my Prolaborate repository and browsing through its properties, and as you know, we'll only see the properties that were assigned using this dedicated forms, and one of this property is the Jira user story link that we just created. And as you could see, it just behaves like a model selection, but in this case it's selecting the artifacts from the Jira project that we have connected to, and it shows you all the items that matches the filtering criteria. And once I select and save, that's it, and Prolaborate creates a two-way link between EA and Jira. So let me look at one of the diagrams where these use cases are used, and we'll see how Prolaborate gives us the visual cue to indicate that there is a Jira connection to the particular item. And clicking on those icons will show you there is a Jira item, and we could just view those details within Prolaborate. And as you can imagine, these are live information from Jira, and the user could also navigate to Jira by just clicking there. And what you would also notice is a link from Jira back to the EA item. So just by allowing your users to choose a Jira link as if he does a tag value, you're creating a two-way link. Another thing that we could do is to define a widget in your dashboard that uses the filters from the Jira project that you have connected and give a live feed in the same portal that your user sees your EA items as well. So in which case you're having one portal which gives information from Jira and EA, which kind of greatly simplifies the efforts from your end users to navigate to two different tools to look at the details. So let's look how this dashboard shows up in action. And as you could see, these are live items fetched from Jira. Let me look at the tabular view to show you the full list. And these are dynamic lists. These are not imported into EA. And Prolaborate will allow you to just click and look at its details. Or you could just click on one of these items and be taken to Jira right away. Now let's look at how Confluence integration works. So we understand that it's very important to share your diagrams in the knowledge management tools that is used by your enterprise, and that's where we have a Prolaborate macro for Confluence that will allow us to choose diagrams or packages or elements from within Confluence and browse through a live EA repository and just pick and choose a diagram, for example, and create a link. So I've created a link to an application components diagram, and the moment I go to the page and see how it is, you would notice that there's a live link from Prolaborate shown in the Confluence page. But it not just the diagram, but it also shows you the list of elements in the diagram, which has all the filtering that you could do to see the fine details. Conventionally, people have used copying and pasting as a technique to create reports like this. An automated mechanism like this greatly simplifies that redundant efforts. And as you could see, you could navigate to and fro from Confluence to Prolaborate as well. There are also other ways to share EA information. So I could take a diagram in Prolaborate and take an iframe out of it, and I could embed it into Confluence or any portal for that case. And that iframe, which is powered by Prolaborate, would be automatically refreshed every time the diagram changes. So in that way, you're having a very simple integration between two tools, but very effective, in which case you don't have to share or copy the diagram again and paste it. You could also share this diagram with the Prolaborate utilities as well, in which case your user would be able to see a Prolaborate frame within the other portal. In this case, I'm using Confluence as an example, and as you could see, the diagram could be just as an image, or it could have the entire capability where you could click and look at its details, or you could see the discussions around it, or you could even see how the integrations are in place. So all that you could do from a Prolaborate portal could also be done from within a Confluence page. So such a seamless integration greatly simplifies the efforts involved in navigating between multiple tools to make sense of it, and it also gives the modeler a great edge. They could choose whatever approach that's convenient for them to share information. We thank you for your time to listen to this webinar. If you have any further queries, or if you would like to see a demo of this or take a trial, please visit our website prolaborate.sparxsystems.com, or please write to us at prolaborate@sparxsystems.com.